Hi, this is Billy Hayes. You may know me through my book or film Midnight Express, and I'm here with Mr. Media. We're talking about a new documentary that's just come out called Midnight Return, the story of Billy Hayes in Turkey.
I'm Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview. You can see, hear, and read more than 1,000 of my previous celebrity interviews at mrmedia.com. That's mrmedia.com. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcast, Apple News, Google Play, or Stitcher, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. On today's show, I'll talk to Billy Hayes, the inspiration for the landmark 1978 drug smuggling film Midnight Express. In that movie, which was written by Oliver Stone, Hayes was played by Brad Davis. Hayes is back in the spotlight with a fresh documentary look at his life before his incarceration in Turkey, after his escape, and on through his shocking return to Istanbul. The new film is Midnight Return. Stick around. Midnight Express was one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. It was probably one of the most horrifying films you ever saw, too. The story of Billy Hayes, an American tourist caught attempting to leave Turkey by plane in 1970 with bags of hashish taped to his stomach, for which he was subsequently jailed 5 years and then resentenced to life in prison, was made into a major motion picture starring Brad Davis and written by Oliver Stone and directed by Alan Parker. It won Academy Awards and caused the Turkish government to go on the attack around the world against the filmmakers and Hollywood over its incredibly unflattering portrait of the Turkish nation. And it turns out that the Turks were right about at least one thing. Many key aspects of Midnight Express were invented, or pick your word, by Oliver Stone. In a new documentary film about his life, Hayes admits the movie got several aspects of his Turkish experience wrong, starting with the fact he was not an innocent first-time drug smuggler. When he was caught, it was at least his fourth time moving hash out of the country. Hayes apologizes in Midnight Return to the Turkish government for the negative portrayal of all Turks created by the original film. It has more than a few surprises for anyone that remembers the original. And Billy Hayes, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, I'm going to start with an easy one. Did your girlfriend at the time actually flash her breasts at you while you were in prison, or did she not? Because to me, that was almost the most controversial thing in the movie.
It's the scene everyone remembers, all the guys at least. I swear that she did. I've said that she did. I've seen them in my mind's eye. And she, in the documentary, says she didn't do that, but it would have been too dangerous. But she did. I've said to the filmmaker, bring Barbara, that was her name, bring Barbara and I together on camera, and we'll talk about her breasts, which are two very lovely subjects, by the way.
So you haven't spoken to her since she recorded her interview?
Oh, no. We talk all the time.
Oh, okay.
She lives in Colorado, and we stay in touch and like that.
All right. But yeah, I mean, I remember and we'll talk about this later, as a, I want to say a 17, maybe 18-year-old seeing that film for the first time. And, having not yet even seen real breasts in person at that point, that was a memorable scene and a lighthearted moment in a very tough film to watch.
That was Irene Miracle, by the way.
Yeah.
Lovely breasts were in that film. Irene and I have reconnected. She and Norbert Weiser, as Norbert said, both of your love interests in Midnight Express, Norbert played one of the characters in the film. They came to an earlier screening of the documentary. Oh. So the three of us got reconnected again, which was very nice.
That is
and
nice.
We, of course, shared Brad Davis stories, of which there are endless stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I should point out to people that Midnight Express is almost 40 years old at this point. It's hard to believe.
And it's still playing literally all over the world and on televisions constantly. And there are still people who have misconceptions about Turkey and the whole Turkish nation based upon the movie, Midnight Express. One of the reasons Sally Sussman, the writer and director of the documentary, wanted to make the doc was to talk about the power of film and how this movie affected this whole country and still does in many very strange, bizarre ways.
Was it? I would think that it would be kind of a mixed blessing for you to go back to this. I mean, I'm sure that you're living in your head Midnight Express and that experience every day because of who you are and where you've been and how public it's been.
Right.
But to go back and participate in a new documentary all about it and relive it all, it's kind of a, it's like, yes, it's sort of my glory, but it's also my, my downfall. And
Well, it's interesting because getting arrested in the Turkish prison was the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to grow up. I learned things I needed to learn in jail. Life was too fast and easy in the 60s. I loved the 60s. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, no AIDS, free love. I loved the 60s. And then things changed. But prison, in many ways, forced me to grow up. It got all my books published. I was at Marquette University. I was in the journalism school. I wanted to write, but I needed to go out into the world and experience life so I could write about it. Surprise, surprise. I met my wife in 1978 at the Cannes Film Festival when Midnight Express, the movie, premiered there. And we've been together for the last 37 years. So, it's hard to say where the road's going to lead. But I've been dealing with everything is before and after getting arrested for me. My whole life turned over. And it still is. I'm still talking about it. I've been doing a one-man theatrical piece for the last 4 years, traveling the world, talking about riding the Midnight Express. And for the last 12 years, this documentary has been happening. Documentaries don't happen quickly. They're not a script. As you know, they're real life. And they keep moving and morphing and changing. And Sally is a bulldog. She just refused to let this go. And after about, I think, almost 12 years, we took the documentary last year to the Cannes Film Festival. Again, Wendy and I got to go back there 37 years after we met, after the original Midnight Express premiered at Cannes. The documentary premiered there last April, which was just a dream come true. And it's been good for the doc, too. It's moved us along.
How did the experience of the documentary debuting there versus the original film differ? Because you talk about in the film what it was like and the expectations. Expectations were actually pretty low, I think, when you went there with Midnight Express.
Well, of course, it was just overwhelming in 1978. I mean, I've been in prison for 5 years. Now I'm out and we're at the Cannes Film Festival and all of this stuff is happening. And yes, it's wonderful and it's great to be out, but it was kind of overwhelming in a lot of ways. To go back now, 37 years later, with Wendy, with a secure, settled existence, which wasn't happening in 1978, everything was whirling and swirling. It was great. And I'm so much different now, and life is so much different now, that to go back again now and have the documentary show a full circle. I mean, I got to go back to Istanbul in 2010, and we filmed that as part of the documentary. Mm-hmm. I got a chance to heal the breach between myself and the Turkish people. I've said from the very first day, incredible movie, amazing. Brad Davis gave his heart and soul, and Oliver wrote a script, and Alan Parker directed it, and the music, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't show my story as fully as I would like it. And it makes some major changes. And mostly it's the attitude towards the Turks. I mean, I didn't like prison, but I loved Istanbul. I get along great with the Turkish people. I made 4 trips to Istanbul before getting arrested on my 4th trip, which I couldn't talk about when I came home. I couldn't write it in Midnight Express. All I could talk about was the 4th trip, because the first trips, I couldn't say that legally back in 1975 at the height of the drug war. And so all you saw in the first book was the worst part of Turkey for me, prison, and then the escape. And the attitude towards Turkey and the Turks in the film was, you don't see a single good Turk. I've said from the beginning that it doesn't represent the people or the country. And they've been dealing with this ever since. Mm-hmm. Their tourism dropped 95% when Midnight Express, the movie, came out. To this day, there are still people who, they meet me and they say, oh my God, Billy Hayes, we saw Midnight Express, we'll never go to Turkey. It's like, no, go. You'll love it. It's a great country. I'm not talking the present government. That's a whole different situation, right. Well, which I despise as much as the government right here in the United States. But the country, the people, it's an amazing country, Turkey. So please go. Don't get arrested. You will not like the prison. That I can guarantee.
It is kind of ironic that you went back there. Was it 2010, 2007?
2007.
2007. You went back there and it was not easy. We'll talk about that, but it was not easy for you to go back there because they didn't necessarily want you back there.
Yeah.
They were afraid of what was going on, and your own people were afraid of what would happen to you. But at that time, it was still viewed as a democratic
Democratic
country.
Republic. Erdogan had not tightened the grip of control that he has now on the country,
So you
and
went,
we were welcome.
yeah, you went back and you cleared the air,
Right.
and then he took the country downhill back in the direction of the way it was portrayed, but
Well,
never was.
I certainly think so. There are a lot of people who oppose that, but that's just politics, and I don't think we want to go into that at the moment.
All right, so let's start. Let's do this in two steps.
Okay.
First of all, let's talk about things that were inaccurate or beyond inaccurate in Oliver Stone's script and the
Okay.
subsequent film. We talked about the girlfriend flashing the breasts.
That was accurate. That was real. That
Okay,
happened.
yeah, she didn't feel so in the documentary, but let's go into more serious things.
Right.
Really, all the Turkish people that are portrayed in this film come off horribly, and you
That's my
obviously,
problem.
yeah.
That's my problem. You don't see any good Turks in the whole film, which isn't valid, isn't true to my experience or obviously to the reality. The biggest changes for me in the movie was, well, again, that attitude toward the Turks, the escape, which in the film is like an afterthought. They kill a guard, which I didn't do, by the way, and
Big,
then
big fact change.
race, big fact change, and then skip out the door in a guard's uniform, and Brad jumps in the air and clicks his heels, and they freeze it. That's the last frame of the film, which is a lovely piece of filmmaking. But that's not how I really escaped. I escaped off an island in a rowboat in a storm. Spent 3 days running through Turkey, dyeing my own hair, eventually swimming the Maratas River into Greece, into freedom. Made for Hollywood. They didn't do it. Alan Parker showed me the movie for the very first time in a little tiny screening room on Fifth Avenue in New York City at Columbia offices, and all by myself. I came out, I was sweating, I could barely breathe. He said, "Well, Billy, what do you think?" I said, I love the film. What happened to my rowboat? I mean, that rowboat, I escaped off an island. It gave me back, literally. I had my life back in my own two hands. I got myself arrested, and I got myself out. I wanted to see that rowboat. Prison takes away so much. Getting myself out gave me back a sense of self that I desperately needed. And he said, what 45 minutes of the film would you cut to put in your real escape? They've had enough. Get the audience out of the bloody theater. He may be right. As a filmmaker myself now, I can understand it, why he did it. Creatively, I know there's a budget question. I mean, filming at sea at night and running through Turkey for 3 days. This whole movie cost $2.3 million. That's lunch, for a week on one of these big sets. So I understand why they made the changes. I'm not happy about it. The biggest change, I think, is the courtroom scene. I was arrested. I was originally sentenced to 4 years and 2 months. 54 days prior to going free, I found out that the sentence, Richard Nixon, the war on drugs, they want to set an example. They resentenced me, and I'm going to be resentenced to life in prison. I'm in the courtroom, and just before finally being sentenced, I have a chance to speak. In the movie, which Oliver Stone wrote, my character curses out the Turkish nation. You're a nation of pigs. I fuck you all. I fuck your sons. I fuck your daughters. First off, the logic of that. You're a guy who's just been sentenced to 30 years in this country's prison, and you're saying all these curses to them? It makes no sense logically. Brad Davis, the actor, did an incredible job. But the audience watching that scene, the audience is with the protagonist. They're with me. They're with Brad, screaming these curses at the Turks and the Turkish nation. I think that's the scene that really enraged the whole world against Turkey and the Turks. It also enraged Turkey and the Turks against Billy Hayes. When I escaped, there was no Interpol warrant when I escaped, or when my first book came out. When they saw this scene in a movie, they issued an Interpol warrant that stood for the next 20 years. And what the truth is, what I really said was something about laws changing from one country to another and one time period to another. And if after more than 3 years in your prison, you're going to sentence me to more prison, I can't agree with you. All I can do is forgive you. Forgive you, fuck your sons and daughters. There's a big difference. The whole world heard kill a guard and fuck your sons and daughters.
Well,
that's what the whole world knew about Billy Hayes. And a lot of them still do, unless they've heard an interview or seen the stage show, which talks about the differences. So for me, I had some problems with the changes that were made.
Well, plus, Billy, I would think here's where I think sometimes Oliver Stone's logic just dissipates and leaves him. He, if you were facing going back into that prison system, who in their right mind, even a little out of their mind, would make that speech?
That's what I said. That's just, it makes no sense at all.
No.
It just makes no sense. I hear kids in acting classes, when they meet me, say, oh my God, we've done your speech, meaning that courtroom speech, in an acting class. All over the country, I've heard that. And I understand it. It's powerfully written. Oliver Stone is a really strong writer. But the logic doesn't play. And the reality and what it does and says about Turkey and the Turks and what it says about me, that doesn't play at all. So that's probably my biggest problem with the movie. You know, again, if Charlie Bronson had come in on a helicopter and took me out, I'd have been happy in real life. I wouldn't have been so happy in terms of the filmmakers. But this is a really bigger change. This is really the heart of the film, I think, is that courtroom scene.
A little footnote for people watching this who may not know. Billy Hayes was actually taken out by a machine gun carrying Charles Bronson in another movie, so right. he has a little experience with being confronted.
Charlie shot me to death, machine gunned me to death in the movie called Assassination, where I played the bad guy, Wolfgang, who was trying to kill his wife, Jill Ireland, who was playing the wife of the president, and Charlie was a Secret Service guy. So I got to work with Charlie and get rigged up and have him shoot me, which was a high point of my acting career.
Brutal to watch, though. Very brutal to watch.
Well, people have said you do an incredible job after you get shot bouncing around. Well, they put squibs all over your body.
Exploding, right. Yep.
The squibs are not supposed to hurt and burn you. Every one of those squibs left a burn mark. Yeah. So I wasn't acting. I was burning and getting hit by those squibs.
They're supposed to pack you better underneath the squibs, I think.
I think so. Yeah. But it was, 4:00 in the morning. We were shooting out in Will Rogers Park. It was dark and stormy, and they were trying to set up lights in the trees, and they were going to shoot it like that. And then finally, Charlie, who doesn't say much, Charlie Bronson came over and he said, this is many years ago, 25 years, to me, kid, can you take a fall? It's like, sure, Charlie. And then Charlie says, all right, everybody, listen up. And when Charlie says that, everybody listens up. And he told the director, look, take those fucking lights out of the trees. Here's what we're going to do. Open the kid's going to come in the door with the gun. I'm going to be outside the window down below. He's going to look out the window, stick the gun out. I'm going to grab the gun, throw him on the ground, shoot him, and we're all going fucking home. And that's what we did. 6 times. He threw me out the window, and finally they got it. Then he shot me with one shot. All the squibs went off. Charlie threw the machine gun down. He said, good, cut. Fuck it, let's go home. I was like, okay, Charlie. I loved him, by the way.
Well, I had to bring that up when you mentioned Charles Bronson. And people will actually see that scene in the documentary.
Yeah. So you'll have to cut a lot of my babble, I know.
No.
Please go ahead.
Nothing gets cut. We
Whatever.
Go straight there.
All right.
So all right. So we talked a little about some of the things that you had issue with, and I think the thing that most people would be most surprised at, and certainly Oliver Stone, who was interviewed in the film, was surprised to learn that you had been to Istanbul 3 previous times. What was the reason that you didn't reveal that previously?
When I got home, my first smuggling trip was April of 1969. 6 months later, October of 1969 was my second trip. 6 months later, April of 1970 was my third trip. My fourth trip was October. My fourth and last trip was October 1970. When I got home, the day I got home was like on a Thursday afternoon, I think. I instantly, I'm going to write a book about this. I'm a writer. I went to Marquette. I've been writing every day, literally thousands of letters. I'm going to write a book about all of it. And I said, but I want to write about all of it. My first 3 trips, I had Turkish friends. I had a Turkish girlfriend. I spent so much time in Istanbul. And my lawyer, Michael Griffith, he said, well, let me get this straight. So you tell me, you want to say that you publicly smuggled hash from Istanbul to New York, sold it 3 times prior to getting arrested on your 4th trip. Is that correct? I said, yeah, I guess so. He said, great. One more question. Are you out of your fucking mind? You can't say that. I said, why not? They can't prove anything. He said, they don't have to prove anything. The Turkish government is going to issue an Interpol warrant for your arrest one of these days. And the American government is going to decide whether they're going to say yes or no. And you want to say to the American government, Fuck you. 3 times I smuggled hash and you didn't catch me. You can't say that. It was 1975. It was the height of the drug war. He also said, you need to be very careful about what you do say, about what you do. And you like drugs. You think all drugs should be legal, which is true. I think all drugs should be legal. The hypocrisy of the war on drugs makes me crazy. He said, you're going to make yourself a really big target by saying all that out loud. And you are a big target right now. You got a book coming out. They're going to do what out? You're on the news. You need to be very careful. Any cop anywhere around the country who decides he just wants to make a little name for himself, you're a big target. So you need to be very smart and very careful. I hear that. I don't want the American government to send me back. So my first book, I could only write about starting at the 4th trip and getting arrested and being in prison. I couldn't write about all the time I spent in Istanbul, which was bothersome to me because the focus is all on the bad part of Turkey to me. I mean, again, everybody's responsible for the movie in one form or another, one piece of it. Certainly if I'd been able to write more in my book about the good side of Turkey, maybe they would have balanced it in the movie, but they didn't. They did what they did.
So Oliver Stone is accurate in this aspect. He did not know that you had been there 3 times previously.
I never publicly stated that, again, for that very reason. I can't have that out there. And he knows, all of them knew, I traveled all over Europe, that I'd been in Pamplona, I'd run with the Bulls, that for years I've been out traveling around. Whether they wanted to find out, this is the innocent. I mean, they wanted this to be an innocent. Well, if you smuggle hash once, you're not innocent. If you smuggle it 4 times, you're not any more or less innocent. You do what you do. I don't have a problem with the part about smuggling the hash. I mean, it's legal now. The hypocrisy of the war on drugs has always been forefront for me. But I understand that it's illegal. You get caught, you have to deal with the consequences. That's the law. I don't agree with the law, but it's not like I'm innocent, and certainly not I'm a victim. I did what I did. I don't agree with the sentence, that's for sure. I still don't agree with any of the sentences.
So, Billy,
But I think Oliver knew a whole lot more than he wanted to admit because it's an easier story for them. I mean, think about the choices they made. The Escape was made for Hollywood. They chose not to do it. Oliver put it in the script. Alan didn't put it in the film. I had a relationship in prison with another guy. They wouldn't allow that. Brad Davis had a scene in a shower where there was steam coming up. And Brad, who was bisexual, who had a big problem with them trying to change that aspect of jail, said, just let the steam come up. Let it be like you don't know the outcome. And they said, no. They forced him to shake his head, as in, no, deny, I cannot do that. They will let the protagonist of the movie smuggle drugs, kill a guard, bite a guy's tongue out, but not touch another person. So that says a lot about them, the producers, more than about me, I think. So I have a problem with that. Now they wouldn't care so much. This is 1975. It was a whole different era. Yep. Drugs are different. Attitude towards sexuality is different. Certainly attitude towards drugs are totally different. Thank goodness, finally.
So you make the film, the documentary now I'm talking about.
Right.
Were you already working with the filmmakers in 2007 when you went back?
Sally Sussman, who again wrote and directed this,
right?
She and her husband Tony. I went to acting class with Tony 30-something years ago, and I knew Sally peripherally through that. They're both writers. They're both directors. They have Emmys all along their walls. They do a lot of soap opera, a lot of other stuff. Sally at dinner somewhere one night heard me talking to Tony about the fact that I would love to go back to Istanbul. It's like she was, what?
Yeah.
Why would you? And I started to explain a little bit about that, and she started thinking. And she's a terrific storyteller. That's what she does. She tells stories. And she saw a story in this, and it led to the idea of doing this as a documentary. And as part of the documentary, to make it really work, we had to go back to Turkey to fulfill this as a creative project, as something that I wanted personally. And as an instrument to allow the documentary to get some funding, because documentaries cost money. They don't make money, but they cost money to make by the people who care enough to spend 12 years sticking with it. Sally filmed me everywhere. all around LA doing theater and shows, and in New York, and she went to London for the stage show, and we went to Istanbul, and they filmed all that, and she spoke to Turks all over the world. This was a huge project, and it took forever, but eventually it got made, and it's out in the theater now. So good for her.
So, but the idea of so she was already working on the film. Yes, when the idea of coming back to Istanbul came up?
I got lost in that. Yes, once Sally got involved with the idea of let's do this as a documentary. Well, actually, what I said to her was, great. Talk to anybody you want about anything, and I don't want to see any of it until it's finished. Because it's hard enough living my life, much less making a documentary about it. And I just know she's a terrific storyteller. And I knew Tony, her husband. So I said, fine, you guys do it. And they did. But it stops and it starts and it moves in one direction. And suddenly something else happens. And, people have a life. While the documentary is going on, people have a life and they're working and they're dealing with life and kids. And it takes a long time and it keeps starting and stopping. And there were times where we never thought the doc was going to get finished. She didn't know what the ending was. Life kept intervening and changing things. I mean, at one point, they did a Midnight Express ballet in London. Like, a what? All my New York friends were like, Midnight Express ballet? When they going to make you wear a tutu? What is it about? It was a brilliant piece based upon Midnight Express. When Sally heard this, it's like, we have to get that. So she flew to London and they filmed the ballet. And then other things would happen. And then the idea of going back to Turkey was always central to the doc. But strangely enough, ironically enough, when we requested it, we were denied. The Turkish government didn't want me back. I'm an escaped convict with an Interpol warrant, and we want to go back, and they don't want me back.
Surprise!
Surprise indeed. We tried in several ways. We were denied. We actually had Ahmet Erdogan, one of the most famous, richest Turks in the world, brilliant guy, started Atlantic Records and knew the Rolling Stones and Ray Charles. He, through a friend, we got to meet Ahmet, and he liked what we were trying to do, which was to heal the breach between Billy Hayes and the nation of Turkey, the people of Turkey. And we filmed with him, and he was going to take this piece of footage and show it on TV in Turkey, which would be easy because he owns all the TV stations. And he said, after they hear what you're saying to me about how you feel about the movie and about wanting to go back and heal the breach with the Turks, that we'll bring you back. We finished that, and soon afterwards, Ahmet tripped on a cable at the Beacon Theater in New York on October 29th, the anniversary of the founding of the Turkish Republic, a big day for them. Ironically enough, tripped, hit his head, went into a coma, and never recovered. So our knight in shining armor was gone. So once again, we thought we'll never get back to Turkey. Out of the blue, there was a phone call from someone who he told me he was Turkish. I'm going to ramble. You have to stop me when you like.
You're doing just fine.
He told me he was Turkish and he was with the Turkish National Police and he'd seen stuff on YouTube where I was speaking kind of like what I'm saying today about, I wish we'd shown some good Turks and the movie doesn't represent the country of the people. He said, we would like to bring you back to Turkey. There's going to be a big international conference there and the world press will be focused on it. And we would like you to come back and say what you've been saying on YouTube. And my first thought is, this is one of my college friends fucking with me. I just know this isn't true. And I started to talk Turkish with him for a while. I realized this guy's for real. Turns out he was living in Los Angeles with his wife. In an hour later, we met at a Starbucks in LA and we started to talk and he was for real. I mean, he really wanted to bring me back. And he said, it will be tricky because you have, I'm a persona non grata in Turkey. I had an Interpol warrant, which apparently had been dropped because Interpol warrants have to be renewed every couple of years or they fade away. It's an odd, weird story. But I was definitely on the list, the no-fly list in Turkey. Me and Osama bin Laden, and his name is crossed out, but my name was still on the list of not being allowed in the country, persona non grata. So we had to deal with a lot of that, and we had several attempts. We talked to the Turkish consulate. Tony and Sally met with one of the ministers of finance. The Turkish economic minister was speaking at UCLA, and one of our Turkish connections took Tony and Sally to this lecture where this guy spoke for 2 hours in Turkish about economics. And the two of them are sitting there. Afterwards, they got to meet him and talk and said, we're doing the documentary about Billy Hayes, and can you help? I mean, we worked for years to get this up. And it wasn't until this kid called me and said, we want to bring you back. And it took months. Suddenly he got off the phone and we tried this. And then suddenly the phone rang and they said, Billy, come to the Turkish consulate. There's a ticket waiting for you at the Pan Am counter, and we have a visa wait. That was on a Friday. By Monday, we are landing at the airport in Istanbul. Tony and Sally on the plane with me, and spent 5 days in Istanbul. I got to speak to the Turkish press and the TV and the Turkish people. They had a big conference, but it was all sort of a little bit undercover because these guys kind of did this off on the side. This thing could have blown up. What they said to me was, best thing for us are images of Billy Hayes walking down the streets of Turkey free, to balance the images from the movie Midnight Express. Again, film. Me speaking is like little tiny. An image on a screen. Film is so powerful. They said, we want to show you free in Turkey. They said, that's the best thing. The worst thing is you walking down the street free and having someone come up and shoot you in the head because you're the most hated man in Turkey because of that movie, because of that courtroom scene, because I told the Turks, I fuck you all and your sons and daughters. They heard that. And here I am. So until I got a chance to speak at the press conference and change that and speak as we're doing now about, I didn't say that. I didn't kill the Turkish guard. I have Turkish friends. Well, that changed everything. When we came home from this conference, in the elevator at the hotel where we were staying, I'm with my Turkish policemen who are around me 24/7. Literally, a guy slept outside my hotel room door in a chair. That's how concerned they were about my safety, which I'm very happy about. But when we got back, people in the elevator said, oh, we just saw you on television. Thank you for speaking about the movie and about the fact that, Turkey is not all like this movie. And it changed everything for me.
And pretty quickly.
It still has changed. Yeah. And it allowed me the show that I'm doing, the one-man show, the stage show. I have Turkish people coming to that, telling me afterwards that this show is cathartic for them because they get to balance those bad images that they've had to grow up with about Midnight Express, about the movie. So I'm very happy when I hear that kind of stuff.
And one of the most astonishing things in the movie, it's a lighter moment, but you want to tell people what's become of the prison that you spent 5 years in?
Actually, it wasn't the prison. That's gone. They destroyed that. It was the lockup. My first night lockup was this old building that was incredible old architecture and cool, but run down and dirty and beat up, and it was a prison. This is the Four Seasons hotels, and we're going around the world finding odd architectural places and turning them into hotels. Mm-hmm. They made the Circuit lockup, where I spent my first night in jail, into a Four Seasons hotel. And when we were in Istanbul, we got to walk around the streets, and we walked past the hotel, and there was this guard, big guy with, looked like from the Vatican. He had a big hat and the things and the sword, and he was greeting people in about 9 languages. We came by and he said, "Oh, hello, come on, have you ever been in here before?" It's like, it's a long story. He just looked at me. But I actually got to go in the courtyard and see this place where I was, my first lockup night. The whole thing, the documentary, Sally took me out to the prison. They didn't want to let me in. They were afraid of that. It might be too bad, which was just fine with me. I didn't need to go back in. But we walked on the street outside the prison, and I looked back up over the wall and over the barbed wire. I knew I was looking for a place. I knew exactly where it was. In between cell blocks, there used to be a place. They closed it off, but there used to be a place you could sit up there and look out through the glass in the bars, down across the barbed wire at life, at the street that I'm standing on, looking back up across the barbed wire at the window I used to look out. It was such a bizarre back and forth. And then we went out to Bakırköy Mental Hospital, which is portrayed in the movie actually very accurately. I don't know if you remember it, but I got myself transferred to a mental hospital. I wanted to get a crazy report so it would be an easier place to escape from. And I spent more than 2 weeks there. In the film, people have said, "Oh, that movie, they made that's crazy, that scene." They actually went out and filmed in a mental institution in Turkey. No, actually on Malta, where they shot the film. They went to a real mental hospital and filmed these disturbed people. I've heard Alan Parker say that he said, look, I don't have any regrets. I'm a filmmaker. I did what I did. I stand up for the movie. Maybe I could have done this. Maybe I could have flown in the good German Fritz who gives you the cigarette, but I didn't do that. What I would not do again is I feel maybe I took advantage of these people in this mental hospital because they were. I mean, I had a couple of actors mixed in, but these characters were really people who had lost their minds. It's so frightening and pathetic. There's so much pathos and fear with people who are just gone. And they put these people there. So in the filming of it, you see that all. I got a chance to go back to the mental hospital with Sally and Tony. It had been closed for 15 years. One day they just locked it up, padlocked it, left it, took all of the crazy people and put them in another place. This is a huge hospital. And they upgraded it, which was good. Thank you, Turkey. It's good for you to upgrade your system because this place was bedlam, like that Boris Karloff film, bedlam, where the inmates bricked the doctor up alive in the wall. That's what this place was. I've been in a lot of strange places in my life. Nothing even comes close to Bakırköy, especially down in the basement, walking the wheel with the rest of the madmen in Bakırköy. And, we got to go back and to walk down that wheel. When we walked in, again, they had a padlock. They had to open it, and the creaky door and dust was on everything. The table still had like plates and spoons all covered with dust, sunlight coming through the broken windows. I got to walk down these stairs to the basement of this madhouse where I never thought I would ever be back again. I always wanted to go back to Istanbul. I never wanted to go back to Bakırköy. And it was such a bizarre feeling to walk the wheel again, just very quickly kind of fall into this rhythm of walking this wheel in this empty, now echoey place. And then Sally said, Billy, come down here. And there were some little punishment cells. And she said, go sit in there. I was like, no, I really don't want to go sit in this little cell because I've seen what happens in these little cells. But I got to walk in and I sat down in this metal and Sally was talking to me and I know I was spouting some kind of innate little responses. But in my head, it's like, I remember this place. I remember what I've seen down here, what smells down here. Like, I just had to freak out. I literally said, I'm done. They said, no, wait, we want to say, no, you have to catch up with me with the fucking cameras. I'm done. And I came out the gate and the Turkish police guys who were waiting for us outside the gate, I walked out and they just looked at my face and was like, I said, çok acayip, which is like very strange. And they said, yeah, they knew. And it was a bizarre experience to actually go down in the basement of Bakırköy.
Well, Billy, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're going to run out of time in a minute. There's one other thing I wanted to mention.
Sure.
And I mentioned this to you before we started recording. We have actually been in the same room together. Back in 78, I was a freshman at University of Miami studying film. And you and Alan Parker, and I think you said Irene Miracle.
I think Irene was with us in Miami, yeah.
Came down you were going around to colleges, showing the film to college students.
Right.
And part of the reason I remembered it was the film made such an impact, but also seeing you over the years, I was never one who took to drugs or alcohol. And I have to say that I think that what happened in that movie may have had something to do with it. Because I walked out of there, I was just like,
at the very least, Bob, my life was a cautionary tale. I've had so many parents tell me, before we let our kids go out into the world, we'd either like make them watch your book, read your book, or watch your movie. It's like, okay, if it keeps somebody from getting arrested, good. That's what I've been talking for 40 years. My message to kids everywhere, all the college lectures I used to do is, do what you like and know what you're doing. Knowing what you're doing means you take responsibility for your actions because you have to live with the consequences. Something I never thought about until it was too late. Now I've got these bizarre consequences. Yeah. Who knows? Anyway, well, it's been good talking to you.
Yeah, well, folks, listen, you can see Midnight Return, the documentary film. It's the follow-up to Midnight Express when it opens this summer on July 21st in Los Angeles. Following that, it will expand to more cities as the summer goes on. Billy, yeah. Are you people find you website, Facebook, Twitter? Do you do any of that kind of stuff?
BillyHayes.com. BILLYHAYES. I don't do it. Again, I can barely open my email, but they've got someone who handles that website. You do that, and it'll take you to Riding the Midnight Express with BillyHayes.com. And that's got all the information about the theater show that I've been traveling with. They got links to docs and everything else on there. So if you want to hear more of my strange tale, go to BillyHayes.com. come see the documentary or come to the Odyssey Theater in LA this week. We're going to be doing 3 shows next weekend.
All right.
It's part of our LA, our New York connection.
All right. Well, Billy, it's been 40 years. It was nice to connect with you again.
You too, Bob.
Congratulations on staying clean and staying out of trouble. And thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Media,
Thanks,
today.
man. I appreciate it. You take care. Okay.
Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience full of hardcore international drug smugglers that would never, ever consider returning to Turkey as tourists in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida.
Hi, this is Rich Scheidner. And if you've ever wondered what it was like to be a stand-up comedian in the 1980s, I'm going to do you a big favor. Instead of billions of dollars for a time machine, you can just spend $24.95 and buy my new book, Kicking Through the Ashes, My Life as a Stand-Up in the 1980s Comedy Boom. It will save you money and give you thrills. It will take you there. Go to my website, richscheidner.com, go to amazon.com, and buy this book.
Excellent introduction. Before you know it, you'll be back to your real life.
There you go.
All right.
Whatever that is.
From what I saw in the film, there could be almost anything with you.
Whatever that is.